Hello, welcome to another edition of the fifth quarter. I'm Mike Ciarochi, sports editor of the Herald-Standard, and joined again by George Von Benko, author of Memory Lane and a WMBS radio personality. We're here today to talk about the Steelers' upcoming game against the Seattle Seahawks on Sunday, 1 o'clock, Heinz Field. I guess anything would be better. Any effort that the Steelers put out has to be better than what they did last Sunday.
No question about that. I was at the Steelers' offices on Wednesday and went to the practice and had occasion to talk with Dick LeBeau in the lunchroom there. And I said it must have been interesting watching the video of that game. He says, yeah, it was a real interesting session, and he says, I got news for you. It looked a lot worse on video than it even looked on Sunday.
Yeah, that's the one time you wish you didn't have that replay button on there.
Exactly, yeah. But you know, everybody thought that they'd be maybe going after 2-0. Now they're just trying to regain their equilibrium.
Well, yeah, you know, and there could be long-term effects of that shellacking put on them by the Baltimore Ravens. You know, the defense looked old, slow, but you know, that's why they're all happy there's another game this week, and really that's kind of the focus of today's show is Seattle. You know, the biggest fallout of the game, other than a lopsided loss, was the loss of Willie Colon. Again, you know,
just terrible.
Torn triceps muscle. He's on injured reserve. He's out for the year after missing all of last season. He never even made it to training camp.
There was an old movie called Lost Weekend with Ray Milland. It's been a lost 2 years for Willie. The torn tricep, and you know, it puts a lot of pressure now because according to reports and the people I talked to, they tried their darndest to re-sign Flozo Adams. He wanted too much money. Max Starks was a lost cause. Max just hasn't gotten himself back into shape, and that's one of the reasons he was let go in the first place after the lockout. So it falls on the rookie, Marcus Gilbert, from the University of Florida, and he's stepping into a big role. He really is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If he can come through, we'll have the Marquise and Marcus show, I guess, on the offensive line. Marcus Gilbert, obviously, a few years ago, was a teammate of Marquise Pouncey down at Florida. Now he comes up, and there's a little bit of pressure on the young guy to step up his game and be ready to play against the big boys.
Well, there is pressure, and you alluded to the fact that Ben Roethlisberger spoke to that, the fact that you know, they can't make an awful lot of changes. They can't dumb down the playbook. They need to be able to do the things that they have to do.
He told him, he said he had a chat with Marcus, and he said one of the things he told him was, hey, you have to be ready for everything, including the no-huddle offense, the 2-minute offense. You got to be ready to go. And we're not going to cut you any breaks. You got to be able to make the plays. But at the end, after that conversation, Ben did come out and say, you know, I'm confident the young man can do it.
Well, and the other thing, he's going to get a lot of help. You know, when the Steelers went through what they went through last year, and you looked at all the injuries they had on the offensive line last year, a lot of these guys are interchangeable parts. And what Trey Essex and a couple of the other guys said to me the other day was, it's knocked everybody down a position, but when we get our reps in practice, everybody has to practice in a couple of different positions because you don't know what's going to happen, and somebody has to be able to be plugged in at a guard or a tackle or center. So they've got guys that are practicing at multiple positions. And then the other thing he said, we as veterans have to try and lend as much help as we can to Gilbert and get him ready. But once he gets out there, I mean, he's on his own.
Right. I did notice last week, I put it in my notes, quotes, and anecdotes notebook for Monday's paper, the inactives on Sunday. If you take a look at them, they kept 7 offensive linemen, 7 defensive linemen active, which is, I guess, a pretty good number for them. It gives them the 5 starters plus a swing tackle and a swing guard. You know, an interior lineman plus an exterior lineman or outside guy, so that they have the flexibility in case somebody goes down in the course of the game. So I kind of expect that to be about the same.
I think so, and they did sign a gentleman by the name of Jamon Meredith, who's a 3-year pro. And I guess one of the reasons they did sign him is that he has played under Sean Kugler before, the line coach, because he played for him at Buffalo. So there's some familiar. They're familiar with one another. Yeah.
All things being equal, George, I mean, considering everything, what do you expect from the Steelers this weekend? I mean, it'd be great to just sit here and say, oh, they'll be fine, they'll come back, everything will be great, once they get home, blah, blah, blah. Everything will come together.
I'm going to be anxious to see what happens, because I had some concerns, which I did not have before, but I told you the last time we chatted that that's the first time I can recall the defense really, in my mind, showing their age.
Yeah,
they were a step slow almost the entire game. They couldn't cover the back out of the backfield. They couldn't cover the tight ends. And Ed Dixon is a decent tight end, but he's not a speed burner by any stretch of the imagination, and they couldn't keep up with him. So I have some things there. And it's funny, I mentioned it to Ryan Clark, and he says, we just have to take care of our business. We know what's going on. There's no panic in here. And I did sense that. There was no panic in the locker room. They've been down this road before. Now they're getting Seattle, and that wasn't a great opening week for Seattle either, because I didn't expect a lot out of San Francisco this year. And San Francisco drummed them pretty good.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, and they are a playoff team last year. Everyone remembers. I'm sure they were the first sub 500 team to make the playoffs. They won the NFC West with a 7-9 record,
and then they knocked off defending Super champion New Orleans. And the big thing I remember from that game, a lasting memory, that run by Marshawn Lynch in that game.
Yeah, it was a real good run and a real good season, a good playoff run. For Coach Pete Carroll, and I believe was that his first or second year back in the league? First year back.
First year back. The thing that's interesting about them too is they made the playoffs with a sub 500 record, but they made some changes. There are going to be 8 new players on Seattle's team in their first 22. That's a big change.
8 new starters?
8 new players that are in the mix of their first 22 players.
Oh, okay.
One of them is a quarterback. Hasselbeck is not there. It's Tavarius Jackson, the former Viking. And there's a big, I don't know if it's big, but it's a palpable quarterback controversy in Seattle. A segment of the populace would like to see Charlie Whitehurst, the backup, play. I think there's a reason he's going with Tavarius Jackson, because on the offensive line you have 2 rookies, a second-year pro, and a third-year pro on the Seattle offensive line. Tavarius Jackson is more mobile than Charlie Whitehurst, and that might be the reason he's back.
He's also been there, done that. He's been a starter in the league, in Minnesota. So, I mean, at least he has that. Now, it may not have been the most successful career you could ever have for a quarterback, what Tavarius Jackson did in Minnesota, but
the mobility plays into it because that line is iffy at this particular point. Now you do have a legitimate back. Marshawn Lynch, when he came over from Buffalo after all the problems last year, rushed for 732 yards in 12 games and had a tremendous playoff game against New Orleans. He's a legitimate player.
I always liked him. I thought he was a good back. Even back in the days in Buffalo, it just didn't quite work out, as happens.
He had some off-field issues in Buffalo, too, which contributed to his demise up there.
But from the Steelers' perspective, defensively, I think they'll at least hold their own against Seattle. There was talk after the game last week that, the Steelers should be expected to win this game and next week against Indy. I mean, in this league, you can't really expect that, but the next real test, I guess the point was, the next real test may not be until they go to Houston.
Yes, and Houston's a pretty nice looking
club. They beat Indy pretty good, regardless of who.
But there are some things I think that Pittsburgh is going to be able to do against Seattle because of that young offensive line that they maybe weren't able to do against Baltimore, and they never adjusted to some of the things that Baltimore did. Lynch is not a bad guy coming out of the backfield too, so you got to be concerned about that after what Ray Rice did to you coming out of the backfield. To a man, they all agree with Ryan Clark when he just said yes, we're going to look at what Seattle does, we're going to look at their schemes, but it's more about what we do.
Yeah, and I agree with that, especially on defense. Offensively, I think the Steelers, you know, if you look just at the statistics and kind of wipe out the 7 turnovers, it's not an awful game offensively, but you can't just throw away the 7 turnovers. You can't
throw away the 7 turnovers.
I don't expect them to be as carefree with the ball, not that they were trying to give it away to Baltimore, but I look for them to be a little more protective of the ball. And
well, there were things going on there too, as I'm sure you'll agree with me, Mike. You know, when Nada, I mean, he hit Richard. He almost looked like he was going to take the handoff from Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah.
That is them knowing what is going on. And doing so, they really were a step ahead defensively too.
Yeah, I really don't think it was a clean handoff, regardless of where Nada was. He was right there. You're right. Yeah. But if you watch the same replay again, I don't think the ball got into Richard's hands cleanly. Not that would have made a bit of difference, but you know, Baltimore just had a tremendous defensive scheme in that game, and they worked it to perfection. You know, another occasion, one of the interceptions, I believe it was Nada who tipped the ball, and Ray Lewis came down with it.
Right.
You know,
but it's a different animal they're dealing with, because Seattle was the 27th ranked defense in the National Football League last year, and you know, they made some changes there. You know, they got Earl Thomas at free safety, and they picked up Alan Branch as a free agent and defensive tackle. They do have a guy, Chris Clemens, who was probably their star player on defense last year. He had 11 sacks. So the offensive line has to be aware of where he is.
But you know, all things being equal, you know, if you hate to put you on the spot, but what do you think is going to? What kind of prediction you have for Sunday?
I think Pittsburgh is going to come out, and I think they're going to make a statement. I really do.
Going to have their way.
They're going. I hope they do. You know, they've got to avoid turnovers. The other thing we didn't discuss is, you know, special teams have improved a great deal, but you got to be careful with Leon Washington.
Oh yeah.
He's the kick returner.
Former New York Jet.
Yeah.
He's a great return man. I agree with you on that. But you know, I kind of expect a lot of the same things. You know, the Steelers, regardless of the opposition, you know, they can't look ahead and say Houston is our next tough game. In this league, you can't afford to overlook anybody. And I think they're going to come to take Ryan Clark's words on this. They're going to try to right their own ship, regardless of who's lined up against them. And it could be all, you know, hide the women and children.
Right. Know, well, believe me, I think the coaching staff has their attention this week.
I
think so. Just you know, Dick LeBeau's about as laid back as you want to get, but he just said it. It's been a pretty interesting discussion going on.
I don't think they want another week of practice like they just went through. You know, although if it works, they may be looking at something similar next week before a trip to Indy.
They might be, but I do like their chances. You know, and I really think they're going to make a statement.
Okay, do you have a score?
I'm going to say maybe 33-14.
33-14. I'll take it. I'll stay close to that, because I think that, you know, the Seahawks do have a little bit of offense. They have a little bit of defense. I'm going to say 35-21, make nice round football numbers.
Okay.
35-21 Steelers. And, you know, I guess that will wrap up this edition of the fifth quarter. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll be back next week to review this game.